Hey guys, welcome to the Masters of Modern podcast on the MMcast network. We are a Magic the Gathering show talking about the modern format and each of the most awesome adjacent formats in Magic. We're brought to you today by the House of Modern, our unbelievable Patreon. That's patreon.com/the MMcast. Please comment, leave your thoughts below, hit that notification bell, and subscribe if you want to keep getting updated on what we're doing here. And of course, follow along on social media with any of the relevant accounts. The information is in the description below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you on the episode.
And welcome back to Masters of Modern from home. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host. He's back. He may or may not have had it, but he is feeling better. Ben Bateman.
What's up, everybody? I'm here. I may still have it. We don't know. We just don't know.
Your hair looks
it's
great.
Impossible to gauge. It's impossible to gauge, but I feel okay. It just constantly feels like I'm cooking with a little too much smoke, which is annoying. But it's not like I talk on camera for hours at a time or anything.
Yeah, you guys get to see what our office/homes look like. You got a team action poster behind Ben. You got Admiral Akbar keeping things trap free in the Kess household. And a lot of stuff is happening. Spoilers. We're going to talk about previews. We talked about some of them last week with Shivam when he was on. We talked about the companions, and they went into kind of like all of the different ways that they might affect Modern and also just Magic in general. He like kind of broke down the process that went behind the bannings of the blue-red one and went through that. It was really interesting. You guys should definitely check that out. In the meantime, make sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Kess Wiley.
You can find me at Ben Bateman Media.
And we are at the MMcast. We also, there's a bunch of stuff in the beginning. You can, all the shout outs there. So make sure to check this stuff. One last thing is, though, make sure, check out our Patreon where there's a lot of cool stuff there. It helps us pay for all the editing that we do. Without it, all of the technology that we have to be able to keep the show going during this time would not have existed. So thank you all to our patrons, and a big shout out to Andrew Kelso, our noble of House Modern.
Noble of House Modern.
Keep being a noble. And today, we are doing part one of probably what will at least be a two-parter review of Ikoria, the most recent set. And I read, I think it's Ikoria? I don't know. I'm never going to say it correctly. This set is the worst set, I believe, in Magic history for my ability to pronounce the names of cards correctly.
It's also the worst set in Magic history for ease of understanding of the mechanics. It's a very confusing set. I definitely think that from a basic understanding of somebody who's played the game as long as I have, reading these cards, I have to think and reread them several times. There's some wording that's really, really strange.
I think that Mutate for sure has there's two parts of it, right? This set definitely feels like the set where they're like, you know what? A significant amount of our audience is digital based. We have a game that is digital focused. We have tools there and resources there to make it easier for a lot of those players. And due to sets that we've come out with recently, like Amonkhet, we've figured out technology to be able to make limited and constructed easier for paper Magic. Because from a constructed play perspective, stuff like ability counters is easy to do, right? You can make your own, you can get cool ones, you can get literally what I'm going to do is run around with a token of each power and toughness that's common, but then also each one will have different abilities, and I can use those for the tokens if need be. So that exists. The big one I think is Mutate, though. I think Mutate is such a confusing mechanic. I think it's probably really grokkable, right? I think that's where they're banking on, is that once you play with the cards once, you'll be like, oh, I get it. This is easy. 90% of the times this makes sense. It's just when reading Mutate rules text, there's a big brick of text there. And
I also think Mutate, reading the rules text, understanding kind of when a thing mutates, there are just little pieces of it that I guess once I play, maybe it'll make a little bit clearer sense, but I still am finding myself with question marks. And then there's stuff like the ability counters where it's it already feels like just keeping track of +1/+1 counters in the past has already been a little hard to keep track of at times. So then adding a bunch of different kinds of counters, when if I don't conveniently have them, I just have dice. Which kind of counter is that? Oh, I think I made a Death Touch one, right? That's what I decided. Stuff like that I think for casual play is going to be kind of a little weird. And then the last piece of it, which is that cycle of if you pay these two colors, it does this cards. Those 5 of them.
Those are written in such a weird way, and I realize why they're written that way. The best example I can think of is just like to be able to target something. Like when you cast a spell, you have to be able to target it ahead of time, and then it checks what type of mana you've used with it. And the word of card like that has to be weird when you're like changing what you could have targeted based on what you paid.
Well, yeah, because it's basically Plax Manta and Cortosar and those cards are the same concept, except that those things are creatures that don't have to target. So they get away with the second part. If you paid this color, this thing happens. Whereas these, to be able to target the second thing. Yeah. So anyway, they're just weird, but there's a lot to talk about in the set. It's a really interesting set. I think probably long term, I'm hoping, like most things that are complex in Magic, we end up loving all of it. I tend to find things that are the most complex in the end are like the favorites. So let's hope that that's the case.
Yeah, this has a lot of like Lorwyn and Rise of the Eldrazi, and like these are sets that are famously like very complicated, but like limited all-stars, like some of the best limited formats of all time, but more for people that have a lot of experience drafting, right? It's not as focused on newer players, and that with Arena existing the way it does, it's going to be really interesting to see how people react to a more complicated draft format now that so much of drafting happens live. I mean, even Andrew Brown, friend of the cast, Wizards employee and play design, tweeted, I think 2 days ago, just that, this is a set where not every card you see is going to be the same type of good that it would be in a different limited format. So as you're playing during the pre-release, make sure to do that. And one last final announcement, I've been given the opportunity to play early. It was really cool. Wizards to let me live stream. So on last Wednesday, I was able to do a whole time travel is hard. A whole early live stream of all of Ikoria. It was cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a thing. You like apply for it. Yeah, I don't know. It was one of those like someone click the link, and I did, and then they sent it, which is sweet. So yeah, so I do think definitely like I'm excited. I'm really excited about limited in this format. I'm really excited that like one thing that is there's fatigue on, and I think this set hasn't done a lot to maybe ease it out, but we'll find out because I think it's really based in the mechanics of this set is power level, right? Like power level over the last year has been so above the top. And this set feels like it's continuing that with cards like Luros and just different things that they're trying out. I think people are kind of like getting tired of just like, wow, this card's so good, which is a weird complaint, right? Like you're getting too much good stuff. And I think part of that is there's kind of, you always want your old cards to be relevant, right? Like that's, I think, part of why people are afraid of the power creep that's happened over the last year. But we'll get into that a little bit over time. Not this week's episode. This is more of a review. But today we're gonna just go kind of card by card, alphabetically. It's not a ranking. I have no idea which one of these.
Yeah, we're gonna
maybe Luros.
Yeah, we're just gonna talk about cards that we think are pretty cool and try to not talk about too much chaff. A quick thing to talk about though, just in case you guys are listening to this, please hit that subscribe button. Obviously, if you're watching. But the other thing I was going to tell you is the other night I tried something out for the first time on our channel, and it seemed to have a pretty good response. Which is I did a live brew, a modern brew on Moto. Basically, I built it on Tapped Out, and then I went and built the deck on Moto later on. And the idea is that I'm going to record some gameplay, and I'm going to actually put that video on our channel so you guys can see a fun, stinky modern brew that I come up with and the actual games played with it. The one that we built last night on the show was a Hedron alignment deck, and I played some games with it. I didn't record them yet. I was going to enter like a daily. I will enter one. As we built it, it's horrible. It's a really awful deck. The side of it that is not Hedron alignment is just a good Esper control deck, and the card Hedron alignment is god awful in the deck. So I have to come up with something a little bit more competitive, I think, to waste some money on playing with it. But I will play some games with it, so you guys will see it and tune in. I'll be doing that more often. I have really had a good time with it, and the comments were really positive. So,
and by the way, I don't know if you need to go on a daily. I like stream when I've streamed. I just stream in like the 2-mans, like the play a game. Have fun. Yeah, because especially if you're trying weird stuff, it's more fun to see just it being played than necessarily like, oh, I'm playing against the meta game. I don't know. Yeah,
maybe so. I should have probably just recorded this tonight. But that's all I wanted to say about that. It was fun, so go check it out and subscribe to the channel if you are not already.
And my name has changed on Twitch. I'm twitch.tv/Kess Wiley. It's the same as everywhere else. There's a whole story behind it. Don't worry about it. But if you were searching for Kesko, or you listen to an old episode that says go look at Kesko, twitch.tv/Kesko. Don't do that. It's Kess Wiley now. All right, first card. Call of the Death Dweller. This is 2 and a black sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. Put a Death Touch counter on either of them, and then put a Menace counter on either of them. So one of them gets Death Touch, one of them gets Menace. It could be the same one, it could be different ones. It lets you bring a 1-drop and a 2-drop back. I think this card, to me, and I put this on the list, then didn't have it. I have it there mostly for in consideration for decks that are trying to combo with 1 and 2-drop creatures, right? Being able to put a Viscera Seer and a Malira, or this is really similar to me. What's the 3 mana sacrifice a creature, put 2 creatures into play?
Victimize.
Like Victimize isn't in Modern, and this has similar vibes to Victimize. It's worse because you're not getting anything you want back, and you don't have to sacrifice a thing. So it's in a similar space.
It's an interest. I mean, I think the part about this card that's the most interesting to me is that if you're the kind of deck that's trying to build a package like a gifts ungiven package, this is a good card that could go along with the 1-drop and the 2-drop that kind of guarantees you're going to be able to get what you want. So right. I think that's interesting.
I wish this was a white card.
How come?
I have liked that this type of like convert a mana cost reanimator based spells have been in white recently. Right? Like this has felt like it meant to be in white's color pie, and then this is back in black, and I don't know how much. I mean, I think this is a limited card first, so I think maybe it being in black
definitely
is important. Next we have Cunning Nightbonder. This is flash. Spells with flash you cast cost 1 less to cast and can't be countered.
Yeah, so this card is cool, right? I mean, there's a very significant this card to me, which is Rogue. People on our show have known for a long time that Rogue is like a favorite creature type of mine and one that I've wanted to see more of in Magic. I think, if you guys remember Vexing Shusher, that's a card from like Future Sight, I don't know, from like Eventide era. It's like hybrid red-green, and it can't be countered. Then you can make a spell you control uncounterable by targeting it with like your hybrid mana or whatever. This is kind of similar, right? It has like a similar feel. That card was cool in Standard and never really broke Modern. I think the fact that this has flashes really good, and like the fact that it reduces the cost of your flash spells is really good. It's interesting how this deck references a lot of stuff that if you have something with flash or like flash costs less, because it means that it specifically makes your like creatures that have flash good and your counter spells not better, which is a good thing, because I don't think you want creatures that like reduce the cost of your counter spells. It's usually not very fair if they have flash. Yeah,
there's like kind of a few things about this. One, just a flash 2 mana 2/1 human is also not irrelevant, especially if it adds this kind of bonus to things. Something to keep aware of is it doesn't. The cards have to have flash. So I saw this ruling, and I might be totally wrong, and you two might too, but I believe this was true, where cards that lets you play cards as if they had flash, because they don't give them flash. The wording for like what's the 4 mana artifact? The blue Leyline is obviously really famous as well. Leyline of Anticipation, but Falconary. So they let you play cards as if they had flash. They don't give the cards flash, and so this doesn't make those cards cheaper. It only works with cards that have flash printed on them. That being said, there's still a lot of cards that's relevant for being able to play this, and then like a Venser effect, or like anything in fairies even. And like there are fairy cards that take advantage of the rogue half of fairy cards too. So I think there's a lot of cool little tricky things you can do in a fairy shell with this card, and it makes it like it just kind of powers out the deck in a way that's interesting.
I mean, making spells that are sprite cost 1 is pretty good. I definitely like that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like that's just by itself is like a really fascinating ability. And anything with flash and power wise, it's like on curve, right? It's a 2 mana 2/2 with flash, which is like fine. And then you just want to play as much as possible, so you can leave counter magic up, play it.
It seems like like Vanillion Click and Scion of Una and Nimble Obstructionist and like Spell Queller. Like there's a lot of stuff that this combos with that I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, giving any of those cards 1 mana off is like very powerful, and you can literally for 2 mana play this, untap, and then have Spell Queller mana up, and still have 1 mana available for other spells you want to play. It seems very actually good. Really good. Yeah,
you can like Serum Visions and like to dig, and then also Spell Queller. Yeah, seems really good.
Next card is Dire Tactics. This is a black-white instant. Exile target creature. If you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness.
I almost skipped this card when I was looking at it in the first place. But what I realized was white-black, instant speed, exile a creature. is actually not as common of an effect as I was thinking. Like I was kind of comparing it to that black-white sacrifice a creature, destroy a creature from like one of the recent Ravnica sets. And then I was thinking, and I was like, you know what? Exiling a creature at instant speed for 2 is actually just very, very, very good.
It's an interesting effect because white and black do have better, like for instance, Jund plays Terminate and Door Dreadbore, right? Like that's a card that sees play out of Jund. But part of the reason I think that is because they're looking for more, like red has less things than white does. Like the problem here is you have Fatal Push and Path, right? That's what this is competing with. But just straight up exiling anything is like very powerful, and being able to like, and having a human is not that hard, right? And it's not like you can't cast this. It's not like cards that make you sacrifice something or you can't cast it unless you reveal a human card. It's literally just like you might lose life on a smaller thing if you don't have a human in play. But as soon as you have a Thalia or anything kind of relevant sitting on the battlefield, you're like so much farther ahead. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. It's a cool card. I mean, I think the application is somewhat narrow. I don't think it'll see a lot of play, but it's definitely notable. I think it is a card that'll see play.
Next we have, I think this is on my list of probably in my top 10 for this set, is Drannit Magistrate. He is 1 white. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands.
Yeah, so this card is totally like,
he's a 1.
It's funny. One of the things that they say about Magic is that when you're trying to find something powerful, look for redundancy, right? Like look for where can I get 8 copies of something, 12 copies of something. And the concept of hate bears is not so much that as long as they keep printing really, really powerful creatures in white and green that cost 2 or less, that just like string together to stop decks from doing things. And then cards like Fauna Shaman, Tutors, Collected Company, Court of Calling, like you start to get like denser and denser and deeper, and just like there will be games where you play this card on turn 2 and your opponent just is basically not able to do much of anything. Like it shuts off so much of what so many decks try to do so easily and for so cheap.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The fact that it's only cast does limit it a little bit more than if it was play, or like if a spell were to be, put on the stack from anywhere but your hand in some way. But I think it definitely has a lot of, it's just another good hate bear, right? Like white gets a lot of good hate bear cards. It's obviously people have been more excited about it in commander sets, just because it shuts down commanders, right? Like you can't cast a commander with this in play. But on the other hand, I think there's definitely potential as just one of the better hate bears in Modern.
If Ancestral Vision saw more play, this would be like, oh great, but like that card doesn't really see a lot of play.
But like you'll hit like any Cascade, right? Like anything from Bloodbraid Elf, you'll hit the other suspend cards,
any suspend card, exactly, any suspend card, any flashback card, souls, you'll hit like. Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a totally good card. Like it definitely is doing cool things, and especially cards that state you can pay them, you can cast them without paying their casting costs, that kind of a thing. Any like red effect, exile a card, play it, like you may cast that card till end of turn type of effect, Chandra, stuff like that. Not that I think a lot of people play Chandra at this point in Modern, but like any of those effects get shut down by this, which is pretty good.
Right. Next we have the Drannit Stinger. It's 1 and a red, human wizard. Whenever you cycle another card, Drannit Stinger deals 1 damage to each opponent. Cycling 1 is a 2/2.
So let's talk about actually the whole entire like 3. Like I guess there's more of them, but like all the cheap creatures that are whenever you cycle X happens, because there's the 1/1 for 1 in white that cycles for 1 that whenever you cycle puts a counter on it. There's this guy that deals damage. There's I think a third one of significance, right?
There's a few. There's one that gains you life. There's the blue enchantment, I think, that blinks a thing under your control, right? It's a flicker effect.
There's the 3/1 for 2 in white that makes a 1/1 whenever you cycle for the first time on a turn. So like that card, any of those cards are interesting in Modern just for the base level because you have Street Wraith in the format to begin with, so you have the ability to cycle something for free. And then on top of that, they've printed aggressively now so many cheap lands that cycle for 1, cards that cycle for a colorless. I think there's something interesting about those cards. Like, I actually think that the 3/1 for 2 is kind of sneaky good. I actually think that, like, if you can cycle every turn and just every time you cycle, you're getting another 1/1, you can do it on their turn and on your turn. So basically, it's just like every card in your deck is draw a card, pay 1, get a 1/1. Pretty strong, like pretty easy to overwhelm.
Yeah, I think anytime you have these cycle trigger effects, we're now getting so many of them in Modern that there's more and more likely to be a deck that's based around them. The nice thing about the Drannit Stinger one is that just like free damage off of all of them, when in a previous universe, the damaging one was 2 damage to any target, but you had to pay 1, right? And this is free damage. You just do a damage to something, plus it's attacking them for 2 as a 2/2 every turn. So I think this has the potential. And if it's bad, you cycle it away. It's the power of cycling. Next,
I would argue that, like, again, just because I pulled some of these cards and I think we're probably not going to talk about them, but there's like a whole bunch of cards they printed into this set that are very interesting takes, right? You have cancel with cycling. You have disenchant, naturalize with cycling. Like, you have all these cards now that are being printed into Modern that's like, it's just going to be strictly better to be able to main deck one of these cards if you need to. Mm-hmm. Like, I never would main deck cancel in a deck in Modern ever, right? Mm-hmm. I would pretty much never main deck naturalize. But if you're telling me that I can cycle it away, and sometimes in my opening hand, that's going to be like everything to me to have a naturalize in my opening hand, I don't know, maybe. Like,
well, right? and we talked about this a little bit last week, where, or even maybe 2 weeks ago, on how cycling as a mechanic feels like a little bit of a, like, I can see cycling becoming evergreen. I think, like, if I were to pick a mechanic that isn't evergreen right now, cycling is that one. And part of that is because of its relationship with Best of One. And because of the way it can work in formats where you don't have sideboard slots in a way that is really accessible, it's so powerful, right? It's so necessary to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to play this card that kills 3 enchantments. Exiles 3 enchantments, but I can cycle it for 2. And that card's so much stronger now or so much more necessary now that you don't have best of 3 as an option, as one of the main ways you kind of climb up ladder. So for those formats, I think that's why they're going to see more printing. And then when you go into the older formats, it just means they're versatile, right? Like, the amount of cards that like cycle is better, and it makes it so no card is ever bad. It's always worst case scenario, an instant speed draw card. The next card on the list, speaking of cycling, is Easy Prey. 1 and a black, destroy target creature with converted mana cost 2 or less, cycle 2. Kind of what we were just talking about, I mean, as a segue. This one is actually like a relevant ability, right? Like, destroying a creature 2 or less. I don't think this is better than Fatal Push, but being able to get rid of it when it doesn't hit targets is helpful.
But it also costing 2 is what makes it a lot less good. Like, if I'm going to play a 2 spell in a deck that's black, like, I already have Assassin's Trophy. I've already got Abrupt Decay. Like, I have a lot of options.
So this is a card you didn't pull that I added to the list for the next one. Right, is Emergent Ultimatum. And this is we kind of can talk about the Ultimatum cycle in general. This is, of the different ones, the one I think has, in my opinion, the best chance of seeing play, because it reads play 2 Eldrazi for 7 mana. So if you can cast this anyway, but basically, there's a thing that people have been asking for 10 years. This is the thing. So there was the cycle of ultimatums from original, or from Shards of Alara.
Yeah.
Most famously was the Grixis Ultimatum, which was the like Nicol Bolas
Cruel Ultimatum.
Cruel Ultimatum. This one is now bringing back. There's 5 more. There's 5 for the other ones, and all of them have these big flashy effects. They saw play in Standard. Cruel Ultimatum has seen play in Modern, never in significant ways, but there's always someone trying to make a Cruel Ultimatum Grixis control deck work, especially pre Kolgan's Command, where there wasn't like a value engine, so there was just a ramp up to a win condition moment. Because if you cast that card, you win. And a lot of these ultimatums are built in ways where you win the game if you cast them. And even, I believe the Jeskai Ultimatum is basically the reverse end half of the Cruel Ultimatum, right?
Yeah, it's gain 5, draw 5.
And and then it Lightning Helixes and draws 5, right? It's it's similar effect. Emergent Ultimatum, though, which is the Sultai one, so black, green, green, blue, blue. Search your library for up to 3 cards, 3 monocolored cards with different names, and exile them. An opponent chooses one of those cards, shuffle that card into your library. You may cast the other cards without paying their mana cost, exile Emergent Ultimatum. Sorry, I when I said Eldrazi, I was incorrect. But it does let you find, like, Iona, Grizzlebrand, and Elishnorn, right? Like, it lets you find just, like, 3 giant monster creatures that are all monocolor and put them into play, in many ways winning you the game. So I think that
Yeah, I mean, Iona can single-handedly win a lot of games in Modern. It's not a strategy people play much anymore, the Unburial Rights Iona strategy, but like that and Elesh Norn, those are like things people have done for years with Gifts and Given. So This is, I mean, it costs 7. I don't think that any of the ultimatums are actually going to be like a thing, though big mana decks in Modern seem to be picking up more and more steam.
Right, like you play one of these at the top end of an Uro deck, and then you just like have it available. I don't know. I think I agree that most of them won't see play, but this is in the colors the ramp to, right?
I also think, just from playing Moto a bunch the last few weeks, that like Arbor Elf with Utopia Sprawl thing is like a thing people do a lot. Mm-hmm. It's like definitely a very, very effective ramp strategy. And 7 mana is not that much. I mean, it is, and it isn't, right? Like it isn't. I don't know. I mean, we also saw like all those big mana Simic decks in Standard this last year. You know, there's a lot of ways to do it.
The point of the deck that's playing this card is to ramp to this card, right? Like the 7 mana is fine if it's your entire game plan and you're able to do it. And there are enough ways to ramp pretty efficiently right now that, like, instead of playing, the question is like, is this better than Primeval Titan, right? I guess really, is this worth going towards versus Primeval Titan? Is there a format where Primeval Titan isn't as good? And I think there are going to be formats where I'd rather just cast something that wins me the game instantly than
but think about also for a second that the and I'm not saying that the Amulet decks would do this, but the Amulet decks, they're ramping into Primeval Titan very, very early with Dryad of the Elysian Grove and all that. So like if you were to play the Ultimatum you just talked about and you search for Primeval Titan, plus like maybe you're playing a single Inferno Titan and maybe like a single other incredible thing in the deck that you can just cast anyway, and then you put Primeval Titan and something else into play and the other into your hand, how are you supposed to lose that game at that point? Right.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think like just sliding this in the decks. I mean, it's a little bit flashier, and it might be a sideboard card out of those decks that just like need something to win over a Tron deck or someone like that, where they're like needing to 1x1 them. But yeah, or they need to just go over the top and win the game quickly. But it does something very powerful.
Yeah.
Escape Protocol is the next card. Blue and a colorless. Yeah, whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 1 when you do exile target artifact or creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this is like, Astral Drift is already in Modern. Like that's the card that's most comparable to this, and the card that a lot of people were already working with. I know Marshall has an Astral Drift card. Or an actual Astral Drift cycle deck already, and so this is just another tool to that. Being able to blink creatures has always been powerful if you can gain value off of it, and it does do that, right? That's kind of the thing you're looking to do, is gain a lot of incremental value where every card just snowballs you through the game. And this is just a backup game plan to that card. Now, this card is worse because it doesn't cycle itself.
Right.
And it only blinks your own things. One of the things that Astral Drift is able to do is blink your opponent's stuff in ways that's tricky and easy to fight them, but there are different options here. Next is Extinction Event. Let me bring it up.
This is the black one, right? Black and 3, choose even or odd, exile creatures of even or odd.
Correct.
Yeah. So this card is really interesting I think the reason this card is interesting is that, number one, they really don't print 4 mana Wraths anymore. So this is not a 4 mana Wrath, but they do print cards like Silence the Believers. There's been like a bunch of 4 mana black, Vraska's Contempt, exile a creature for 4 mana. That's like been a thing now for the last couple years. The fact that this is only single black, so you don't have to be such a heavy black deck to play it, and the fact that you can kind of control how it works and that it exiles. Like a 4 mana black spell that can exile multiple creatures is pretty strong, actually. Mm-hmm. There's something to be said for this card. It's a little wonky, and it's funny how the last couple of years they seem to be playing a lot more with the whole even odd thing.
Well, this set's a theme, right? Like they've definitely tried it out for a while, and this is the first time where they're like, "Oh no, this is the theme of the set. We're doing even and odd." There's the 2 companion cards that care about even and odd. There's this card. There's a few other ones. It's a weird...
There's the white one that I had pulled, which is white and 2 for a 3/3, mm-hmm. And it has protection. Choose even or odd, and it has protection from spells of that even or odd casting cost. Which I actually think that card is really interesting, because if you cast odd, a 3/3 for 3 that you name odd has protection from Lightning Bolt, has protection from Fatal Push, has protection from Path to Exile, has protection from like most of the prominently played removal spells in the format.
Yeah, you have the Jund removal spells are the only thing you have to really worry about at that point of Assassin's Trophy and Terminate and Dreadbore, and but even then 3 mana stuff you're also dodging. So it's like, and you dodge Uro too, which is like a weird, it like has protection from Uro.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So the next card is Fiend Artisan. This is the card I probably was most excited about during previews. 2 hybrid mana, black, green, black, green. It is a nightmare 1/1. Fiend Artisan gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. X green black hybrid mana, so X1. Tap, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So it's like got mad birthing pod vibes. It's got mad value vibes. If people remember mercenaries from back in the day, it's got mercenary vibes. And just a 2 mana gets big based on how many creatures are in your graveyard. Like this could be a 2 mana 4/4 very easily. Like it can be Tarmogoyf size without working very hard.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's one-sided, which in terms of the growing, which I think is probably one of it makes it a little less good than a Tarmogoyf in that sense. That if they nuke your graveyard, it's just a 1/1. But like whereas Tarmogoyf, it still reacts to their graveyard as well. I do think that the birthing pod vibes are cool. You have to pay the casting cost of the thing you're searching for, which is there's a little more like a Sataniel Flute, that old card from back in the day. Probably gets played in Commander, I'm guessing, because it like gets huge things. Maybe, but it's a little bit more like that. But it definitely does have like a little bit of like a Fauna Shaman birthing pod type of thing going for it, and I think it seems sweet.
Yeah, and kind of the like, yes, if they nuke your graveyard, it's a 1/1 again, which is better than what Tarmogoyf would be, right? It becomes a 0/1. 2. But Tarmogoyf is easier to make bigger, right? Because getting spells into your graveyard or getting sorceries in your graveyard, getting lands in your graveyard is a lot easier than getting a creature there. But the ability to sack something late game, it's a bunch of different cards all put together that it's not as good as maybe all those cards, or in some ways it's better, or the costing requirements are different, but it has the potential to do a lot of those things. I mean, it was Nightmare of the Reliquary was the other thing that people were it was meant to be creature Nightmare, Night of the Reliquary, which is like obviously
very
pretty powerful place to be, and that costs 3 mana, and this costs 2, and is arguably much easier to cast. Right, green, white. Yep.
Yeah, I think the other thing about it that's really cool is so normally a card like this would not be hybrid green black. It would be green black. The fact that you can play this in a mono black deck,
right?
That it's a creature tutor that is in a mono black deck. You think about this on turn 2. Geralf's Messenger on turn 3, and then the next turn you activate. You can sacrifice your Geralf's Messenger. It just comes right back. You're heavy into Devotion to Black. You can chain up the tower eventually and get yourself like a Gary into play if you want to just drain him out. There's like really, I mean that black zombie that I liked so much that when it died you could pay extra that resurrect something. Relentless Dead is what it's called. There's like really really cool heavy mono black Gravecrawler zombie vibes with this card.
Shrine of Nykthos is very good with this. Yeah, I'm this is high up there on my favorite things. The next 2 cards I'm just going to bring up quickly is mostly just they're cool. First one is more probably playable, and that's Fire Prophecy. And this is 1 red, deals 3 damage to target creature. You may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library, and then you may draw a card. So it's a burn spell that lets you loot backwards, or rummage, whatever they're called. I think it's 2 mana, which is a lot, but like that's a lot of card filtering on a weird red card. And
but it doesn't put it. Remember, it doesn't put it into the graveyard. It puts it on the bottom of the library. So generally speaking, I mean, I'm all about this card. I think this card is really cool. I especially like this card for limited. I think that's like an especially awesome place. Like I think to me, this feels like a first pick and limited card. But I also think it not putting the card into your graveyard is going to be a little less good for strategies that want to take advantage of delving and other things like that. So it's a totally sweet limited card.
Right. I think it's more about filtering your hand, right? It's about making your hand better and like getting rid of a land you don't need than it is about filling your graveyard with spells. The next card, which is just fun that this exists and it's ridiculous, is Flame Spill. Red 2, deal 4 damage to target creature. Excess damage dealt to that creature, it dealt to the controller instead. So they've been trying to make trample on a spell a thing for, I think, 20 years now. Like, they're just like, can we put trample on a spell? And due to the fact that trample has weird creature rules built into it, it doesn't work. They finally they just did it. They're like, people will get it.
I know. I thought it was funny when I read. I was like, excess damage. Like, you're trusting your audience to read that and just like know what that means. Like, it doesn't say damage dealt beyond lethal damage to this creature is dealt to its controller, which is I figured like that's the way they would normally write it. Excess damage trusts you to actually know what the F you're talking about.
And this is kind of another thing you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, how complicated this set felt, and how weird a lot of these rules and mechanics were. This set, like unstable, whatever the most recent one is, because it's unstable, unhinged, unglued. So unstable.
No, unstable. Yeah.
Unstable had this card in it. Unstable had a version of mutate in it, right? Like, so that set was very much almost a like, let's release this. If people get it, then this set's okay. If people don't get it, then we have to maybe rework these things. Because the timing also kind of is like right when development was happening. They definitely were like seeding stuff to see like, oh, how problematic is it going to be to have these kind of effects in a game? And people responded so positively that I think it carried over. And I think this is the card that's like kind of the signifier of that. Flourishing Fox, which is the card.
I think Flourishing Fox is the one we talked about already, right? That's the one white you cycle.
Well, I do want to bring it up again because we brought it as a greater cycle. This is a card I think could see real play, though. Like,
yeah, I like this card.
Flourishing Fox is one white creature fox. Whenever you cycle another card, put a +1/+1 counter on Flourishing Fox. Cycling 1, it is a 1/1. But it's a 1-mana 1/1 that gets real big. If you're playing a cycling themed deck, right? If you're playing those Astral Side decks, you can get this pretty big pretty quickly. If it's late game and you don't need a 1-mana 1/1, you can just cycle it too for 1 mana, which is like whenever anything has cycling 1, you should relook at it. Not only because there's decks like not Ad Nauseam, sorry. There's decks like Living End in Modern where like the more cycling 1-drops you have that are big dirty creatures, the better. Also, even in this mode, like if I draw this on turn 7, I can just cycle it and get it away. And then I can move on and get whatever the next spell is. Or I can play it as a threat that I need as I cycle other cards to make it bigger.
Do you think this gets slotted into those like Hollow One style decks?
I do think this card sees play with Hollow One. Like I think those two go together. But I don't think the like a bunch of red spells that just make me discard a bunch of cards and taking advantage of discard triggers is where this card would want to find a home. Which is something that's interesting about the set in general. Amonkhet was very much like discard and cycling, right? They were kind of always attached to each other. Yep. This one doesn't have those attached. There are things that obviously trigger off a discard, and we'll get to a blue-red legend eventually that is like all about that, but it's not as attached as it was in Amonkhet. The next card is General Kudo of Drannit. He is the 1 black-white legendary creature human soldier. He is a 3/3. Other humans you control get +1/+1. Whenever he or another human enters the battlefield under your control, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. You can pay 2 and sacrifice 2 humans, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So you have a lord, a human lord for humans, which is just a relevant thing. But the thing that humans I think is important and best at is all of its cards kind of interact with their opponents in ways that's like incremental. Thalia makes things a little bit more expensive. Kitesail Freebooter makes them discard a card for a moment. The blue-white human that I always forget the name of, Meddling Mage, lets you stop them from playing a spell, right? Like it's all mitigated interaction while you're beating them down with just efficient threats. And this guy does all of those things, right? He like pumps all your team, making your team better. He starts eating their graveyard, so you get graveyard removal out of it. And then you can also start killing stuff like Uro and Primeval Titan and any big creature they play. I think this is a pretty easy. I don't know how many of them you play, but I think he slides into human decks as at least a one of in sideboards, if not something more significant.
I think it's interesting when you look at those tribal decks. What Modern has really proven time and time again is that once you get past 2 mana in one of the tribal decks, the slots become super, super, super competitive for what you actually want to play in the 3-drop slot. Because like the humans deck, for instance, like when they printed Militia Bugler, it was like, okay, like this card feels like it's a shoo-in for humans, right? How could you not want to play a 3-drop that's a 2/2 that digs for more humans? Like that seems like a shoo-in, right? And like I feel like they've printed other things over time, similarly to Merfolk, where at a certain point there's just not enough room to play all the cards you want to play. Like you just can't play all the good things on curve at 3. So this card is reminiscent to me a little bit of Anafenza, the Foremost, the 4/4 for 3 that prevents like graveyard shenanigans your opponents have. It's obviously it's not a lord, but it's like similar in that like tricolor 3-drop slot. I feel like probably this gets played in that same slot because I don't think human decks are like fiending for more lords to push them through. I feel like they have enough power to usually win the game. So, and I don't know if like his exiling one card when he comes down on turn 3 is going to be enough, to actually get the job done. And again, sacrificing 2 humans to destroy something 4 greater is a good thing. But if they're resolving Primeval Titans and the cost of them resolving like Primeval Titan is to kill 2 of your creatures, that's probably not great for you. Like you're probably losing the game if every giant creature they costs you 2 of your creatures to get rid of. Sure. So I don't know. I think it's good, but I'll bet it's like a 1 or 2 of.
Okay. Yeah. I won't even say more than a 1 of. I don't think this is a card you need multiples of, but once you draw 1, you would be happy to have just the versatility of it. The next card, which is on theme with this and maybe is better, is General's Enforcer. And this is black and white human soldier 2/3. Legendary humans you control have indestructible. You can pay 2 black and white, exile target creature from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. That second half is maybe value at the end of the game when you need something that's good late game and you just need to be able to do something with your extra mana. But a 2-mana 2/3 human that makes legendary humans indestructible when there are so many powerful legendary humans seems like something that also has potential. Just protecting Athalia. Like, how does a deck, you have to have Path to Exile to beat Athalia into Athalia?
It's like an on-curve 2/3 in a deck that wants more humans that then makes all of your other cards in the deck more resilient. That's the kind of card that feels like, depending on the metagame, you'd play more of them, right? You'd be like, okay, against the burn deck, that's going to just try to burn my guys out. Like, I'll just play this. If it eats a lightning bolt, fine. It's going to cost you 2 to cast it because Thalia's in play. Like, you're really behind at that point.
Yeah, like, and I think it's a special type of deck where you need to be more on the legendary. But even stuff like Malira combo, where this protects Malira just by itself, right? So, like, there's a lot of different decks that I think have enough legendary humans as cards in their deck just adjacently that can take advantage of this in a way. That's interesting. The next card after General Kudo is Heartless Act.
Find out what that card is.
This card is a heater. And I think it's my pick for best removal in the set, which is saying a lot.
This card's a heater. I'm so excited about the card.
Black and colorless. Heartless Act is an instant. Choose 1, destroy target creature with no counters on it, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. Now, there's not that many creatures that have counters on them in Modern. It is not that common of a thing you have to deal with. So just that as a card is pretty much just the best version of Doomblade we have. It's not like, I think at that point you still play Assassin's Trophy or what's it called over it? But what's it called is Terminate. But the other feature of this card, which allows you to make a thing in the ice lose all of its counters just by casting it by itself, is fascinating. And being able to just get a Grixis removal spell that's good 99% of the time in the format, on top of also being a combo piece with one of the better threats in Modern, seems sweet.
It seems so sweet. It also combos with one of my all-time favorite cards in Chronozoa. That was the first thing I thought of when I looked at this card. I had always wanted to make the Fate Transfer Chronozoa deck.
Does it?
So
can you target? Is it a creature when it's in the suspend zone?
No, Chronozoa is not suspended. Chronozoa is 1 blue, 3 colorless for a 3/3 like amoeba or whatever flying, and it has vanishing. And when the last counter is removed, it goes to the graveyard. And when it's placed in the graveyard, it has no counters on it. It doubles and comes back as 2 copies. So I love the idea that I could play playing a thing in the ice deck with Chronozoa and 4 of these, and I just have a really good removal spell that, like, end of turn, when you tap out for your spell, I target my Chronozoa with this and it doubles, and then I can attack with both of them and they both tick down to 2. Like, that seems pretty solid to me. Now, granted, the thing in the ice flipping and getting rid of all my tokens seems horrible, but they're both creatures that want. And you can play Chisei, Heart of Oceans. Remember that card?
No.
Blue, I think it's from Kamigawa. I think it's blue 2 for a 4/4. What? Yeah, right there. I think it's blue 2 for a flying 4/4 legendary creature at the beginning of her upkeep. Remove a counter from a permanent you control. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Which, like, seems really solid. I like it's a lot of, like, blue 4, but, like, still seems cool. This card is sweet though, and also because think about a couple of the other things you can. So you kill lots of creatures. There's also a decent number of planeswalkers that
turn themselves.
into creatures. Like, like Gideon turning itself into a creature, and maybe you've already hit it once, and all of a sudden you just play this and you kill Gideon, right? There's in Modern Cube right now, there's the red 5-drop Planeswalker that makes dragons. That he makes a 4/4 dragon. He also turns himself into a dragon, I think. There's like a decent number of Planeswalkers that turn themselves into creatures.
Well, there's one. Like the coolest one is, I mean, my favorite is Sarkhan from War of the Spark, right? He turns all of your Planeswalkers into creatures.
Yes, is that the one I'm thinking of? Maybe the red Sarkhan?
Yeah. The red Sarkhan is like... Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about, which is like, that's pretty great. So I think this card is super solid. Like, I actually think this card's going to have a home in Modern for sure.
Well, the other card, and I don't know if... I think we won't get it today because I'm going to talk about it now because I'm so excited. The Ozolith. Yes. Which is the 1-mana artifact that if a creature were to die with counters on it, you can move those counters to the Ozolith, and then at the end of your first main step or before combat, you can move those counters onto another creature. If you turn a Planeswalker that dies, so if you take, say, the big Gideon and you ultimate him, and it dies when you ultimate him as a creature, and then you can then move those loyalty counters onto the Ozolith. On your next turn, if you use Sarkhan or another Gideon that has an ultimate that's relevant, or another creature that has an ultimate that's relevant, you can then move those loyalty counters onto it, and then ultimate with it.
Just epically, just jumping from Planeswalker alt to Planeswalker alt to Planeswalker
moving them off of Ozolith. So like in a weird Planeswalker tribal deck, then who knows how Modern playable. But like, so you have the 5-mana, you have a few Sarkhans that turn into dragons. You have a few Gideons that turn into to creatures. I think those are the only 2 characters right now that have I become a creature and attack powers as part of their power suite.
Because Nissa always makes lands.
This makes lands. Koth makes lands. They both kind of do the same side of that. So I think those are the main 2. But Sarkhan being able to do it to any Planeswalker is what's insane, right? Like the Ozolith with Sarkhan in play, you can literally just make any Planeswalker ultimate on the next turn that Gideon dies. I don't know. I'm excited about it. There's a bunch of other stuff we'll talk about Ozolith later. I just want to talk about the dumb Planeswalker mechanic today as we talked about Heartless Act. Hunted Nightmare, Ben.
This card's exciting. I can tell you what it does. It's black 1 for a 4/5 menace nightmare creature with sweet art. When it enters the battlefield, you put a death touch counter on one creature your opponent controls. And it's playing off the old hunted theme. It's not as good as the old hunted creatures because, well, or in some ways it's better than the old hunted creatures, I guess. But a 4/5 menace for 3 is like good. Like in a world where you get like Gurmag anglers and stuff like that, it's a little less compelling, but the fact that it has evasive is pretty strong. And if they don't have a creature, then that counter doesn't go anywhere. So I like this card. This card's sweet.
And the last card, I have for those who don't know, there's a Hunted Handsome deck out in the world. Ben played it at GP San Diego, and it involved playing stuff like ratchet bombs and engineered explosives to kill the tokens from the hunted cycle of cards from Ravnica.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm so glad I knew all of those things. And basically, and Leyland of Singularity was the big thing. So it made it so that the tokens would cancel each other out due to the way the legendary rule worked at the time. And now that legendary rule changed, making the deck not function anymore. But Ben is probably doubly excited for all cards in the hunted cycle to be printed. And this is a new hunted creature. It is doing the hunted thing.
It says hunted on it.
It says hunted on it. And it's handsome. So the last cards we will be talking about today to wrap up the episode is the land cycle. So this is there are the tricycle lands.
Yes.
Indatha Triumph, or the Triumph. So they are 5 lands. They all tap, they enter the battlefield tap. They all tap for one of 3 colors.
The wedges.
The wedges. And they all also have those types. So for instance, Indatha Triumph is the Abzan, or Indatha, the Abzan color combo, which is green, black, white. It is a plain swamp forest and taps for all those 3 types of mana, enters the battlefield tapped, and you can pay 3 mana to cycle it. So similar to the bicycle lands, which people hated the name of for some reason, so I'm sticking the tricycle, which was from Amonkhet, and those were allied colored lands that for 2 mana you could cycle them, but they also had the land type, so you could fetch for them. So these are the second time they've ever printed cards with the ability to be fetched that produce 3 colors of mana. This is the first cycle. The first time they did it was the Tree Folk land from
Murmuring Bosk.
Murmuring Bosk from
Morningtide.
Morningtide, yeah, one of the Laurelwind 4 blocks, and that was a forest, and that's it, because that whole tribe was about like all these creatures were kind of like half forest, half creatures at the same time because they're tree folk. These are just a full cycle. They enter the battlefield tapped. They are tri-land. They enter tapped, which is, I know, a problem for people. Though the fact that they're fetchable, like I play with the bicycle lands actually probably more than other people in Modern even at this point, just because there are turns where you can, like turn 1, if I don't have a Thoughtseize in Jund, I'll just put a cycle land in play. That way I don't drive. I fetched for it. It was going to enter the battlefield tapped anyways. But then late game, being able to draw lands that you don't need and being able to cycle them away is really powerful. And this does it for 3 lands. I think these are worse than the bicycle lands. I'm going to be on the record there. Being able to cycle for 2 is better than getting a 3rd color and a mana. But I can imagine playing one of these and 2 bicycle lands, or just one of the, like if I'm only playing one of these over one of the other ones in like John or in any of these color combo decks, I can see being a thing I would do.
It's also like the ease of use to get up to 3 types so easily means that stuff like Wild Nacatl and stuff like strategies like that are kind of, it's an interesting new sort of wrinkle to tackle. I think that where these cards are going to shine the most will be in bigger like 100 card formats where you want to be able to like search for the one. Like in Highlander, I think we'll play probably all of these.
From Canadian Howler to Roulette to even Commander and Brawl and all those.
The fact that they cycle, it makes them really strong. I think in Modern, in the right deck with enough fetches, you'll play one of these in every one of those decks, unless it's like a deck that absolutely needs untapped lands every turn. But if you're like a more control-y 3-color deck in these colors and you're playing fetch lands, like you definitely will play one of these. Because like you just said, you will just search for it tapped end of turn on turn 1 a lot of the time. Like that's going to be totally fine to do.
Yep, I agree. The alternate arts on these are amazing. There's some of them, like the comic book alternate art cards from this set. We didn't really talk much about them. We'll talk about it later, but they're gorgeous, and hopefully Marshall has them on screen right now.
They're really cool looking.
But the base versions of these, I think they'll see some play. Like I think a Tri-land, like I've Murmuring Bosk saw play, right? And I think these are strictly better than Murmuring Bosk. This one specifically, like I think actually just it is, because you don't lose life to tap it for black and white, and you have the ability to cycle it. They both enter the battlefield tap. So like if Murmuring Bosk saw play, I guess Murmuring Bosk entered untap if you controlled a tree folk. That was its like one move.
So it's a little better in that. I think if you control or reveal, I can't remember which.
I think it's reveal. It's still It is not strictly worse, but
because you can't cycle it, and also like it's pain land and all that stuff. I think these cards are cool. I mean, I'm excited about these cards.
So that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And we will see you guys next week. Hopefully I'm healthy. Is what you? Hopefully Ben will be healthy. Hopefully, hopefully you guys are all doing okay. Wash your hands, wear breath masks, don't touch people or things. We are really excited. Thanks Wizards for letting us do kind of the early preview streams on for free this last week. Make sure to check us out on Twitch. I'm at Kess Wiley, or twitch.tv/Kess Wiley, and then Kess Wiley, KESSWYLE, everywhere. Twitter, Instagram. If you type that in onto a social media, TikTok. Big shout out to, I did a big TikTok with Zbex and a bunch of other people. That was really awesome. Make sure to check that out. If you hadn't seen it, it went more viral than I expected. So that was really, really, really dope. They're all really cool. Anything else?
All right. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Try to knock out the second part of this soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.